Hey, what's up, guys? Coach Mac, playfastfootball.blogspot.com. First of all, let me just take some time to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday season. Make sure you enjoy this time with your family and with your loved ones, because before you blink, it's going to be back to the grind in the off-season, strength and conditioning, and clinic season, and spring football season. So take some time to enjoy your time off and your loved ones at home, and give yourself a little bit of a recharge. Get the batteries charged up again so that when it goes back to the grind, you can go full time, full speed. I'm going to do a little bit of talk today on wide receiver skills and some of the things that I think make effective, efficient wide receivers. Again, these are all my opinions. I was a college wide receiver for 4 years, had a pretty effective and efficient career at the Division III/1AA non-scholarship level. Was able to do a lot of great things as a receiver. So, the things that I was taught and the things that I used as a receiver, I think are a very effective way to play the game. I think they're a very effective way to play the game at the high school level because, I was 5'9", 150 pounds in college. Not a big physical receiver like you see today. Not a physically imposing receiver. Had to use a lot of techniques and skills that suited my strength as a player, and I think a lot of those suit a lot of the kids we see at the high school level every day. Let me start by saying, or at least giving you something slightly controversial to think about. I don't view the stance as a fundamental of the game of football. Okay. I'd like to talk today about stance. I'd like to talk today, about leveraging or stemming defenders when running routes. I'd like to talk a little bit about getting off of press coverage. And I'd like to talk about stalk blocking, okay, and just some techniques used in stalk blocking. As we start with the stance, I don't believe it's a fundamental, and let me explain to you why I say that. I was an avid golfer growing up. I'm still an avid golfer to this day. And a couple of years ago, I was listening to a very prominent figure in the game of golf, and one of the most highly respected figures in the game of golf, and a very prominent player in his day. And basically, he was talking about the fundamentals of golf, and he was saying that a lot of people view the stance as a fundamental of golf, and the reason he thought that that wasn't an accurate statement was simply because if you went to a PGA Tour event and you were watching all the greatest players in the world and you stood on a driving range to watch them practice, as you walked up and down that driving range, you would see a whole different bunch of stances. You would see some guys that were more upright, you'd see some guys that were more flexed, you would see some wide stances, you'd see some narrow stances, you'd see guys that played open, you'd see guys that played closed. And his opinion was very simple. If all the top players that are the best in the world playing the game all use different stances, can the stance really be viewed as a fundamental of the game? And I personally feel the same way, about stance in football. Today we're going to talk about wide receivers. Okay? I feel like there are probably a lot of effective ways to stand and get into a stance to play wide receiver. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is, whatever you can do most efficiently and effectively is the best stance for you, okay? But if you turn on a game, whether it be a college bowl game right now or an NFL game right now, I don't think you're going to see every receiver stand exactly the same, all right? So to me, that can't technically be viewed as a fundamental of the game if we are not teaching it the exact same way to every single player, okay? Now, whether, it's really an irrelevant point, because whether we think it's a fundamental, whether I do or don't, is really irrelevant, because the bottom line is you have to teach somebody how to play in a stance. Okay? So it is definitely a necessity in the game. It's definitely a tool and a skill set that you absolutely must have to succeed in the game. But I don't think it necessarily makes it a fundamental if it's not the same way or done the same way and taught the same way to everybody by everybody. Okay, so as far as the stance is concerned, okay, I was always taught that you need to mimic the stance of a sprinter in a block in a 100-meter dash, or the way they run their 40 times at the combine, okay? And in essence, what I'm trying to say is you'll never see the fastest people in the world doing something for time, standing straight up and down, okay? All right, with no flexion in the ankle, knee, hip. You'll never see them in more of a rigid state. Anytime you watch the Olympics or you watch an NFL combine, when you see somebody run, the fastest people in the world are always either in a starter's block, okay, or in a possible three-point stance, okay, but something that provides flexion in the ankle, the knee, the hip, and puts the body in a position to burst and accelerate at the quickest rate of speed. Okay, so again, I don't think you're ever going to see people running as fast as they can and standing straight up and down. I don't think you're going to see people running as fast as they can, okay, all right, in a stiff body demeanor or position. I think you're always going to see flexion. So for me, as a receiver, I always try to, and was always taught to, get as close to the stance of a sprinter in a block as you possibly can, okay? So for me, the most important thing to me in a receiver stance is the flexion and the knee bend of that front leg, okay? We want to get proper knee bend on that front leg, all right? And we want to provide great flexion in the ankle, knee, and the hip off that front leg. So what we like to do is we like to sink our hips, all right, and get as much knee bend and flexion on that ankle, knee, and hip on the front leg as we can. So for me, it would look like this. I would try and get as much bend on that front leg as I possibly could, okay, with my chest almost directly over that front knee, okay, and probably with about 75 to 85% of my weight on that front leg, okay. I'm not leaning on my toes by any means. I'm sitting straight down through the knee, okay, providing great flexion in the ankle, the knee, and the hip, all right, so that I can get off the ball and accelerate, okay. For me, my back foot, all right, my back foot was always slightly wider than shoulder width, okay, and it was probably deeper maybe than normal. You know, I don't think there really is a reference point to where your back foot goes. I think to me it's where you feel comfortable. I never felt comfortable accelerating in a stance with my back foot right underneath me. I always felt comfortable with my back foot back a little bit further and a little bit wider than shoulder width. So for me, it looked more like this, chest over knee, all right? Plenty of flexion in the knee, ankle, hip, okay? Chest over knee, back foot on the toe, resting on the toe of the back foot, okay, or more of the balls of the back foot. My toe would be there, all right, so that's not really a true statement. It's on the balls of my back foot with air under my heel on my back foot, with my weight and my chest going directly over my front knee, okay? That is for me, okay? I want to be comfortable and relaxed in a stance, okay? The stance is the one thing you know as a receiver you're going to do on every play. I may not catch a pass, I may not run a route, I may not block somebody, okay? But I know, regardless of the play, I'm going to be in that stance on every given play. So I have to be comfortable in that stance because it's something I'm going to do on every single snap. So I have to be comfortable for me as a player, okay? And that is what provides me with the most comfort in my stance, all right? The other thing for me as a player is I always wanted to be relaxed as a receiver, because I think as a receiver we're trying to do things in the quickest manner possible. We're trying to get from point A to point B, whether it be to run a route, to cut off a defender, whatever it may be. I have to get from here to there as quickly as possible, and I don't think stiff, rigid muscles allow you to do that. I think you have to be relaxed, okay, to the point of what legally referees will allow you to do. All right, for argument's sake, back in the early 90s when I was playing receiver in college, I loved to be relaxed and I loved to have a little arm swing. All right, so for me in my stance, okay, personally, I love, like we just talked about, that bend to the front knee, that chest over the front knee, great flexion in the ankle, knee, and hip, getting down as close to a sprinter's block stance as I could. Okay, so for me as a receiver, I loved arm swing. I love my arms to hang, and I loved them to swing. Okay. And I even had some trigger in my back foot, all right? I was always moving my back foot a little bit. At some point in time, the referees would come and maybe say, hey, you can't swing your arms, you got to stand still, you can't move your back foot. I would always push that as far as I possibly could with each referee on my side, okay? Because for me, it's about relaxation, it's about comfort. So I want to know I can get down in that stance and I want to be relaxed and I want to be ready to fire and drive off that ball with no false steps, and I want to be ready to go, okay? I know there's a lot of people that play with their hands up, okay? I know that there's a lot of good receivers that play in a stance that way. It's not for me, okay? Again, I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm not saying that no good players do it. There's a lot of guys that stand that way. For me, relaxation was my hands down, all right, towards my side, and I like to have, all right, a little bit of probably a nervous, all right? I like to have a little bit of a relaxing swing in my hands. It's just something I was used to doing, okay? And anytime anybody would argue with me about, you need to have your hands up ready to go to beat press coverage, I would always say, well, when I was playing in college and I was actually playing the game, I didn't see a lot of DBs lining up to press me like this, okay? All right? Most of the DBs that lined up to press, they had their hands a little bit down and relaxed, and they were going to have to shoot their hands to press. So I felt like I was fine with my hands down and relaxed because I felt like I had plenty of time to respond to what they were going to do if we were facing press coverage. All right? Again, this was just me, but I don't feel like I ever saw a lot of DBs pressing me in this position right here or this position right here. I didn't see a lot of DBs that played like that. So I didn't feel the need to stand as a receiver with my hands right here. Okay? I felt like I had plenty of time and I could be nice and relaxed, okay, with my hands here, and I could get them wherever I needed to get them to release off the ball. Okay? Another thing about the stance that I think is important, try and make sure your toes point up the field. All right? This was one for me that I had to battle all the time. I had a real habit of my front foot getting closed down inside. It was more comfortable for me. Okay? And then what happens is as you're coming off the ball now, you're actually crossing. All right, you're actually crossing the line of the axis of that toe. All right, so in order to be in proper sprint mechanics, you need to make sure that that toe is pointing straight up and down. Okay, you want that back foot to be pointing straight north and south. Okay, also for me as a receiver, I wasn't a very big player. I wasn't a very physical receiver. So if and when I was going to get pressed at the line of scrimmage, I wanted to eliminate the target the best I could, because if a defender got hands on me, I was going to lose that battle. If I exposed my chest, I was going to lose that battle because, again, at 5'9", 150 pounds, I wasn't a very physical presence as a wide receiver. So, for me, another thing about my stance is I felt like I eliminated some of the target from the DB trying to press. All right, I felt like I almost made myself smaller by bending, all right, over that front knee, and by being relaxed, I felt like I made myself and the target a little bit smaller when it was time to defeat press coverage, okay? And again, there's probably a lot of guys who stand a little bit taller and play from a little bit taller stance, and they're great players, all right? I'm just, talking about the things that made me a better player and the things that went through my mind when I was getting in a stance and having a rhyme or reason to why I was trying to do some of the things that I was doing. All right, and why were they important? Why did I think those things, or why was I being taught those things? And for me, I thought I could eliminate some of the target and not give you that big chest or not give you that target to press at the line if I could sink, okay, and make myself a little bit small. Okay, so again, a lot of different ways to play in a stance. I think at the end of the day, you got to avoid the false step. You got to eliminate the false step. You got to get off the ball. You got to try and get off the ball hard on every play. So for me, those are the things that I think can get you in and out of the stance comfortably, fire off the ball, okay? And again, they're things that were successful for me as an average to below average size and physical style receiver. So I think any of the kids we have in high school, can do either of those things. Next thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is leveraging or stemming defenders based off their leverage when you are running routes. The common fault I see in the standard high school, junior high school receiver, okay, is they always want to run to the path of least resistance, okay? And what I mean by that is they want to run away from leverage of a defender, all right? And what you have to understand when looking at the leverage of a defender, the one thing you have to understand is the leverage that defensive back plays on you is indicating to you where he absolutely does not want you to be. Okay? So when you have a defender with outside leverage, he is telling you that you cannot get outside. He does not want you outside. Okay? If he's playing you with inside leverage, he's telling you that you cannot get inside, and he absolutely does not want you inside. Okay? All right? And to me, that's very, very important as a receiver when running my routes. Okay? The other thing that's important about leverage to understand, by a defender playing leverage on you, inside or outside, he essentially takes away half of your route running capability or half of your arsenal. Okay? So when he's playing me with a certain leverage, he essentially is taking away those routes by his leverage. As a wide receiver, I always want to get a defender head up. Okay? If I can get a defender head up, that gives me a two-way go. Okay? That gives me every route in the package that I want to run. All right? And it gives me the ability to get him to flip his hips and do the things that I want him to do now that I have him head up. Okay? So again, I think one of the biggest faults in high school receivers and young receivers you're going to see is they always release away from the leverage of the defender because they think that's the easiest way to get open. Okay? Another thing that it does, when you attack the leverage of a defender, you actually create more space for the quarterback to throw the ball. Okay? So, for argument's sake, let's just say, and again, we're not talking about underneath defenders and other coverage players. Right now, we're just talking about one-on-one, me and a defensive back. Okay? If I'm going to run an inside slant route, okay? If I am going to run an inside slant route, okay? And, just to regress a little bit back to the stance for 1 second, I personally teach all of our players to play with their inside foot that is closest to the ball up, okay? And one of the reasons I do that is because our quick game routes are all based off of steps. When we're throwing quick rhythm passing game and a timing game, our routes are based off of steps. So we're going to run a 3-step slant and a 5-step pitch and a 4-step out and a 4-step fade if there's off coverage. So anytime I am running an inside route, I have to break off my outside foot. If my outside foot is the one that is back in my stance, so if the camera was the football and I kept this front foot closest to the camera up, my back foot is my outside foot. So that means my outside foot will always be the first step that I take, which essentially means my outside steps are always going to be odd-numbered steps. So when I want to run an inside breaking route planning off my outside foot, it's going to be an odd step. Okay, so if I were to run a slant, it's a 3-step route. If we're just talking about generic off defender, I'm not talking about press coverage. Off defender, 3-step route, I'm going to run a 3-step slant because I know my 3rd step is going to be my outside foot, which gives me a chance to get it in the ground and make a sharp plant towards the slant route inside. Okay? All right, so again, just a point that I forgot to bring up in the stance a little bit. And that's how you know these videos are live and not edited, because I have to go back now and talk about it. I teach my players to play with their inside foot up. Okay? That's just me. That's how it times up better on steps in our quick game. Again, not a fundamental. You can put your inside foot up, you can put your outside foot up. I don't think it matters. It just works out for us the way we teach our quick passing game to have your inside foot up. Okay? Going back to, the route running and leverage now. If I had a defender that was outside leverage on me, and I wanted to run an inside breaking slant route, okay? If I release straight off the ball and leave him with outside leverage, okay, when I go to make my slant break inside, okay, I'm not creating any more space for the quarterback to throw the ball than the space that he's already created for me, okay? By attacking his leverage, all right, by attacking his leverage and getting him to honor, okay, getting him to honor that, all right, what I've done is I've effectively created more space for the quarterback to throw the football. Because again, if he's outside leverage on me and I attack him to get him head up, all right, again, I release to stem him to get him head up. So he's outside leverage on me to my, all right, this is my right hand. It's probably your left as you're looking at it from the camera. But if he's on that side, I want to release at him. Okay? Number one, I want to take away his leverage.
I want to get him square so I can make a two-way go. But what you're going to see, what that does is that provides more space for the quarterback. Okay? Because by releasing at him, I've effectively widened my split. Okay? So that now when I come back to the slant route, I've effectively created more room for the quarterback to throw the football. Okay? When you talk about splits a lot of the time, you talk about if you're split way wide, you can only run inside routes, and if you're split tight, okay, you're probably going to run outside routes. When you stem defenders, you create an illusion of a new split. All right, so if that defender is outside leverage, and I line up and then I go ahead and attack his leverage first, I've effectively widened my split. Okay, which in essence, all right, I've given the quarterback a little bit more room to throw that football. Okay, now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create separation in my route from the defender. Well, here's how I'm going to create that separation. I'm going to attack his leverage where he absolutely does not want me to be. Okay? He doesn't want me to be outside of him. He's told me that by his alignment and by his leverage. So I'm going to threaten that leverage first and foremost, because if that's where he doesn't want me to be, that's what's going to get him to panic. Okay? So again, I would love to get him head up and give myself a two-way go, okay? But in reality, a good DB that's playing with leverage is probably going to try and keep that leverage throughout the course of the route, okay? So, my fight is to get him head up so I have a two-way go, okay? But on the other side of the coin, I know, as a receiver, that if he fights to keep leverage on me, if I release wider, he's going to widen. So what's effectively going to happen is I'm going to bring him further away from the passing window by widening my release to stem him and get him head up. Okay? So again, if he's outside of me and he's playing me with outside leverage, the first thing I want to do in my route is stem to get him head up to give myself a two-way go. Okay? I don't want to run a route in a straight line, and I don't want to just rip inside. Okay, because that's where he wants me. He's told me that's where he wants me by his leverage. Okay, so I want to attack his leverage first, get him head up, give myself a two-way go. Again, keep in mind though, a good DB is going to maintain proper leverage. You know, they do stem and weave drills too when they back up. So as I effectively start to attack him to the outside, okay, I'm going to do one of either two things. I'm either going to get him head up and give myself a two-way go, or I'm going to get him to widen and open the window even further for the quarterback. If I release outside towards him and he stems and weaves his pedal, he's now moved himself further outside so that when I do stick the slant break, I've moved him further away from the quarterback. Okay? And again, when you're throwing a slant route, sometimes if it's zone coverage, the underneath players probably have a lot more to do with where the throwing window is than that DB. I get all those things. But right now we're just talking about how to proper leverage someone when running a route and how to stem, all right, to get them head up or to create, all right, your own space, all right, as a wide receiver. Okay, let's talk about, for argument's sake, the post route, okay? And, you know, off the post route, you're always going to have the possibility of running the post corner. You have a DB that plays you with outside leverage, okay? If you run your post route in a straight line and inside because he's outside, and that's the path of least resistance, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to allow him to stay outside and on top, and all he's going to do is he's going to squeeze, he's going to stay on top of that route, and he's just going to squeeze it back to the middle, where he either has help or he can win on top of the route, okay? So that at the worst case scenario, it's a complete pass that he can either try and break up, try and get two hands on intercept, or at least make a tackle so the play doesn't go for 6 points. Okay? So if he's outside leverage and I'm attempting to run a post route, by releasing straight at him, or straight down the field, and straight inside, I'm allowing him to maintain that leverage, which is where he wants to be, all right, the entire duration of that route, because that's the reason he's playing outside leverage. Okay? If I want to effectively create further separation, the first thing I want to do is stem that defender to try and get him head up. Okay? I want to stem to try and get him head up. Okay? If I can get him head up, when I then go to make my post move and I give any type of head and shoulder stick, okay, now I can create separation and possibly get him to flip his hips. so I can create separation for the quarterback to throw the ball and make the big play. So if I'm releasing towards the camera and that defender is on my right hand, your left as you're looking at it, all right? When I release, I want to release out to stem him and get him head up. I want to give myself a two-way go. Now, if he maintains his leverage by widening with me, now that I have released outside, if I effectively have gotten him to widen a yard or two, I've given myself more room in the middle of the field and I've given my quarterback more room to throw the football. Okay? Argument's sake, all right, let's say we're on the goal line and we're running a fade route and the defender takes that hard inside leverage position. Most of the kids that I have, when that alignment happens, they're all going to see that alignment and release straight to the fade. Okay? They're not creating any further room for their quarterback to throw the ball, and they're letting the DB play a game of angles to where he can beat you to the point by running on an angle and not having to chase you from straight behind, okay, and effectively then use your 40 time or your speed to your advantage because you have him stacked straight behind you. So, goal line fade route, defender on the inside. Most receivers just want to speed release right to the outside. Again, problem. You don't create any extra room for the quarterback to throw the ball, and you allow the defender to keep that proper leverage that he wanted the whole time, and then play an angle to make a break on the ball. Okay? So, if you have a defender with inside leverage and you want to run that fade route, okay, you're better off threatening or stemming the inside leverage, trying to get him head up, but at the same time, if he wants to maintain that leverage, by threatening it, you're also going to get him to move further inside. By getting him to move further inside, you've now expanded the window for the quarterback to throw the football. Okay? Now, if you can ever get him on your hip to where you can beat him and keep him on your hip, now what you can do on the fade route, if I turn this way, it might be easier. If I can keep the defender on my hip and allow the quarterback to throw the ball to my outside hand, okay, I've got him stacked right where I want him. He's got to beat me through, okay, through my body, all right, and he's got to run a true legit 40 time faster than me to get to this point, okay? So if I can ever get him on my back hip stacked, okay, instead of fading straight to the outside right now, all right, and running straight to the back pylon, with that guy in inside leverage, if I can ever get him to where I have him beat and I'm now running and then fading to the ball, not running straight to the pylon, I'm fading with the throw of the quarterback. I'm giving the quarterback more room to throw the ball, and I'm making a tougher play for the defender by stacking him on my hip. Okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about press releases and how I like to beat press release. But again, in theory, if a guy is inside leverage, the first thing you want to do in your route is square him up. Give yourself a two-way go. Don't just release outside, okay? Now, if you're running a concept that is mandatory outside release, well then you're running some type of spacing concept. You're not primary. Mandatory outside release to free up the other routes in the concept for the quarterback based on what the offensive coordinator or your coach is telling you to do. There are some things that have mandatory outside release, so yeah, you would speed release outside as hard as you can. I'm talking about one-on-one route running to get yourself open. You must attack the leverage of the defender to get him either A, okay, head up, give yourself a two-way go, or to further leverage him, okay, away from where you're trying to throw the ball to give your quarterback more room to work. Okay? So again, don't run to the path of least resistance when running routes. There should be no routes, even though they're all drawn up in the playbook, there should be no routes that are run in straight lines unless a guy plays you directly head up, which you'll almost never see in football. There's inside and outside leverage. If a guy is inside and outside leverage, your route should never look like a straight line. It should always have some type of variation in it because you're working to get him head up. Okay? And always remember, as a receiver, all right, the defender's leverage is where he does not want you to be. Excuse me. Always attack that leverage first. Always attack the place that he does not want you to be. Why? Because he will always honor the fear, all right, before anything else. So if he's inside leverage, he doesn't want you inside. The fear of you getting inside will really make him honor that, okay? All right? And again, if he's inside and I release outside, I'm releasing right where he wants me to be. There's a reason he's inside or outside. Use that reasoning against him as you run your routes. Okay? Use that reasoning against him to run your routes. All right? I'd love to get further in it. Maybe another day we can actually go outside and videotape running routes, but right now in general, just in a chalk talk session, okay? Attack leverage, try and get your defender head up, okay? Try and give yourself a two-way go, and attack leverage to create a bigger throwing window and a better throwing opportunity for the quarterback, okay? Now I'd like to talk a little bit about press release stuff, okay? I'm going to use this chair right now. Hopefully it's in a good position on the camera where we can see it, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about press release, and I'm just going to talk to you today about double move releases, okay? And basically what double move releases are they are releases where you are going to make your first step and move towards the side of the route you want to run, okay? All right, again, a double move means my first move is going to be to the side I want to release to run a route, okay? If you're running an outside route, when you double move, you will always move outside first. If you're running an inside route, when you double move, you will always move inside first, okay? Now, the most important thing to understand about press coverage and releasing and beating press coverage, okay? Two things that they're always going to tell you as a DB or a wideout. You beat press coverage with your feet, you press cover with your feet. If you ever listen to the great ones talk about press coverage, all right, if you listen to Nick Saban or any of the great DB coaches in the country, you press with your feet first, okay? All right, and how you align and how you keep that alignment with a receiver, all right, is with your feet. It's the same thing as a receiver. You're going to beat press coverage with your feet first, then your hands, all right, on your releases. So it's important to understand that. So when talking about beating press coverage, the first thing you have to understand is the only way any of your moves are effective is if they are outside the framework of the defender. The framework of the defender are his hips and his shoulders, okay? So this chair right here is a defender, all right? So this chair, all right, the outside of this chair is outside the leg and outside the leg. That is outside the hips and shoulders of the defender, which right now is the chair, okay? At any time you make press release moves and they are just inside the frame of the defender, they're not effective and they're not efficient because you're not getting him to do what the ultimate goal is, and that's to flip his hips. When you want to beat press coverage, the ultimate goal is to get that guy to flip his hips opposite so that you can then cut to the butt, okay? Which means cut behind or go behind where his hips have flipped opposite, okay? So, in order for me to get somebody's hips to flip, in other words, if this chair was a defender, in order for me to get these hips to flip open or flip open, okay, I have to be able to make moves outside the framework that threaten him to get him to open. If all my moves are tight inside his framework, when he skips back, he's just going to stay in the framework. He never has to open his hips because I haven't made him do so. Okay? So, first and most prevalent or important thing, make sure your moves are outside the framework. Okay? So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a double move release to my right, your left on the camera. Okay? The first thing I must do is make my first step, okay, outside to the right. My first step goes to the side I want to release. I want to release to my right, so I'm going to step to my right first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first step, and it's going to be outside the framework of that defender. Okay? That's my first step. Again, hopefully you can see this on the camera. That first step has to be outside the hips and shoulders of the defender. Okay? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my second step, and I'm going to make my second step outside the framework of the defender on the opposite side. Okay? And this is where I am also going to throw my head and shoulder dip and fake, because if I'm releasing to my right, or if this is my outside right now, I got to get him to flip his hips inside. Okay? So, double move. My first move is going to be made, all right, outside where I want to release first, outside the framework. My second move is going to be made inside the framework where I want to release, okay? And I would like those moves to be gradually gaining ground as well, so I'm attacking that defender, okay? If I do everything at the line of scrimmage right here, I'm not really effectively attacking him. So I want these moves to be gradually gaining ground. Outside, inside, here's where the head and shoulder dip comes, because I want him to open and present his hips into the football so that I can cut. I want his hips to turn like that. So I want to get his hips here, turned inside so that I can come back and release outside and I have his hips turned. Okay? So again, all right, double move. First step is outside the framework. Second step is outside the framework. Okay? First step goes where I want to release. I'm releasing outside. First step is outside. Okay? First step, second step. All right? And then eventually, as you get better and quicker, it's got to be 1, 2. Hard head and shoulder fake. Outside the framework. Most important thing. Stepping outside the framework. Outside, outside. Always outside his framework. If I don't step outside, he doesn't flip his hips, I'm not effective. As far as hand play, okay, personally for me, as a smaller receiver, I always try to aim somewhere near the wrist when the DB shot his hand because the arm bends at the elbow. For me, as a smaller receiver, if I got somebody up by the tricep or the shoulder, I wasn't strong enough or physically good enough to gain leverage like the Reggie White hump move. I couldn't make that move. That guy's not really moving. All right, most of the DBs that I played were 15 to 20 to 25 to 30 pounds heavier and a lot stronger than me. So I always tried to aim somewhere near the wrist to see if I could get that arm to bend when I released. Okay, so I always took the hand to the side I wanted to release. So right now I'm trying to release to my right. Okay, so when I go to release and I make my double move, I'm going to try and take my right hand and grab or get close to the wrist of that defender as he tries to jam. Okay? That first, the side I want to release, that hand is always the first hand to clear. And I want to try and get that hand, when he presses, I want to try and get control or get it at least away from me. The second thing I want to do is I want to take the backside arm or hand now, okay? And usually I'm either going to, all right, rip and pin away, okay? So again, it would be clear, move here, take this hand under, rip, and then press back and pin to get those hands away from you. Okay? Alright, so again, it would look like, alright, it would look like right here, it would look like outside hand, pin here, backside hand, rip, under, uppercut, and pin and press back into to get those hands off. Okay? The only other move I suggest, alright, is the short swing or the cut, alright, where you would make your double move, take that front side hand to clear, take that back hand and short swim, throw a jab, whatever terminology you want to use, short swim to cup. And again, you're always working your hands, whether it be rip or cup, you're always working them away from your body towards the defender because you want to get his hands off of you. Alright, so it's either rip and pin back in, okay, or it's slap, cup, short, and down, away into his body, away from your body. Never, ever, ever, alright, unless you know, if you're just an ultra-talented 6'4" receiver, never, ever open the rib cage with a big swim move, okay? Just exposes everything here and you're going to get thrown off your route. Keep your body tight, keep it compact. Compact, if you're going to swim, slap, short rib cup right here and press back away and into that defender. Now, talk a little bit briefly about it on a leverage. When you beat a defender, stack the defender. What that means, if this chair is the defender that's pressing, okay, and I don't know on this camera angle how good I can do this, but I'll try and show you. If this chair is the chair that's pressing me with inside leverage, when I go to run my route, if I run an outside route, I don't want to continue running further away from the chair, okay, because it just gives the defender an angle to chase me down on the route. When I beat the press coverage, I want to make it a 40-yard dash now, and I want to make it physically, time for time. He has to chase me in a straight line, okay, depending on what route I'm running, but I need to get him to chase me in a straight line because I got him beat, okay? I don't want to give him an angle. So if I were to beat this chair that's pressing right now, the first thing I would want to do if I were to beat it is as soon as I get into my route, I want to close it out and stack it. All right, almost step right behind it. Stack it and get it behind me on my hip, okay? Get it behind me on my hip. The better angle would be here, all right, for the TV or the camera. I want to get that defender. I want to beat him, and I want to step behind
and get him stacked as I run my route, I want him here. Okay? I don't want to beat that defender. Okay? And as I beat that defender in here, okay, I don't want to beat that defender and run away from him, all right, and allow him to catch me on an angle. I want to close him out and stack him and get him on my hip. All right? My wide receiver coach in college used to yell all the time, stack him, hip him, stack him, hip him. As soon as we beat press coverage, he would just start yelling, stack him and hip him. All right? And I knew right away what he meant. Close him out, get him on my hip, get him stacked behind me. That's where I want him. All right? I don't want him chasing me on an angle, and I want to create more room for the quarterback to throw the ball. So if I get him stacked on my hip, I can allow the quarterback to throw the ball outside so I can fade to it. When I just run outside, I keep him in the passing lane longer and in the passing window longer. Okay? So again, double moves outside the framework of defenders. Always release the way you want to go. The toughest one to teach is the inside release. Okay? If you had a defender that was inside leverage and you wanted to release inside. Okay? Toughest one to teach for two reasons. You constantly talk to your receivers about not false stepping. Right? So now if my inside foot is up and I have to release inside, my double move rules tell me that I would have to move my inside foot first. When you're at the high school, junior high, or Pop Warner level, you're going to fight the false step so bad, you don't ever want to give your kids permission to step with their front foot. Okay? So what we do is we just add a slight trigger step. If I got to release inside towards my inside foot, all right, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my back foot and just move it very shortly, almost heel toe or almost even. Okay? So it's this almost becomes a triple move, even though I'm not making a move with that back foot. It becomes a three-step process. The first step is going to be taking that back foot, okay, and moving it short up almost even with the front foot, because now I have to move inside. Again, from this angle on the camera, if my front foot is my inside foot, and I don't want a false step, and I have to go inside first, that would make me pick my front foot up to move it inside first. Now, as I got better in college, my college coach would allow me to do that if I didn't false step on all my other releases. But until I got good enough to do that and had the body control to move my front foot first when I wanted to, I always had to move the back one first, bring it up slightly about 4 to 6 inches. Then I would go inside, outside, back to inside. Again, I'm trying to release inside. So my first move needs to be inside, outside the framework of the chair. Okay? So it'd be slight stagger, in, out, back inside, whatever hand move I was using. Okay? All right, again, as I got better, my coach allowed me to move my front foot first. I would distribute my weight. Same stance, I just distribute my weight a little bit differently, okay? And I would go front, out, and then back. Don't suggest it at the lower levels because you don't want your kids to false step. So don't teach them a release that allows them to false step, okay? So when you're making the inside one, have your kids trigger step 4 to 6 inches first, then inside, then outside. Make sure the steps are outside the framework. Concentrate. Feet first, hands second. Slap, rip, pin. Slap, short swim, cup. Okay? Hands and feet, hands and feet, hands and feet. Okay? Last thing I want to talk to you a little bit about, all right, is stalk blocking. And again, stalk blocking is very simple. Stay in the way as long as you can. All right? Stay in the path between the running back, the ball carrier, and the defender as long as you possibly can. You don't have to initiate contact. You don't need to make contact, all right? And you really won't make contact until that defender initiates it to you, okay? But if that defender never comes forward and you stay in between him and the ball carrier, you don't effectively have to touch him to make a block, okay? You know, again, as a smaller receiver, I was not a very good blocker. I didn't have the physical tools. It wasn't as much of a want to. I just didn't have the physical tools. I got dominated up top. Anytime I was in tight, I would lose that battle all the time. So for me, it was more of a positioning, leverage type deal than it was a inside hands and, you know, and be strong. I would never win that battle, even when my hands were inside. I just physically was too light and just wasn't good enough to do that. As I got to college, you know, the cut block, you can cut in college, and that opened up my blocking, my blocking options a ton for me. Never became a great blocker by any means, but
I could survive. And one of my most memorable moments in college football in my career is, my good friend of mine and my tailback in college, his name was Anthony Russo. And my junior year, his senior year, he, became a 5,000-yard rusher, and he eventually broke at that time in 1993, he broke the Division III national career rushing record. Well, on his run to eclipse 5,000 yards, all right, we run an inside run, back then it was probably just ISO, but I'm playing X as the single receiver, and we run an inside run. So what I do is I go up and I work up to the safety to see if I can get the safety for the home run block. And what ends up happening is Anthony gets to the second level and he bounces it. Okay? So as I work towards the safety, I've got the corner squeezing with me. All right? So as I work towards the safety, Anthony ends up bouncing the run in a manner to where I go and I cut the safety. And the way that Anthony ends up bouncing the run, I effectively got the safety and the corner blocked. And Anthony bounces to score a touchdown, and that was his run that broke 5,000 yards. And that'll always be a memory for me, and I know it is for Anthony as well, because on his biggest highlight of his career, I have a highlight on there doing something that I was not very good at, and something that I was definitely not known for. But I have a memory now that lasted me forever that I threw, a block to spring him on his run for 5,000 yards. So, I was never a great blocker. I did have some good blocks in my career, but it wasn't one of my strong points. But at the same time, I understand, how to block. I just physically wasn't gifted enough to be that great at it. But again, let's just talk about the tools, per se. Let's not talk about why I was a terrible blocker. Let's just talk about the tools needed. If you're going to stalk block, you have to understand that really all it is essentially it's a mirror drill with the DB. And the drill that you do all the time is called mirror dodge, mirror dodge. And that's where the receiver will line up in front of a DB, and the DB will shuffle back and forth, changing directions to try and get that receiver off balance and try and get himself clear. And all the receiver's going to do, all right, and the drill usually starts with hands behind your back. All the receiver's going to do is shuffle to mirror the path of the DB as the DB changes direction. Because essentially all we're trying to do is stay in front of that DB. We're trying to stay in front of that DB. So it starts off with just a mirror dodge drill. All right, so you would just mirror, that DB would move, I would move with him. Every time he changed directions, I would change directions. Then it would go to mirror dodge punch. All right, and you would go about 6 to 8 inches apart, and you would do mirror dodge, all right, and now you could, instead of your hands behind your back, your hands would be down, and you would mirror dodge, and when the coach blew the whistle, all right, you would punch, elbows in, thumbs up, and get your head out of the block. So it'd be mirror dodge, whistle, punch. Mirror dodge, whistle, punch, And we would work those drills over and over and over again. Just to understand that as a receiver, your blocking was more, the stalk block was more of a mirror, stay between the defender and the ball carrier. Another drill we would do all the time, I could probably use this chair kind of as an example. All right, we would get down on our knees with our heels on our butt. All right, and somebody would stand in front of us with a hand shield, and the whistle would blow, and when the whistle would blow, we would strike. We would roll our hips up and just strike the hand shield. So the coach would blow the whistle, and on the whistle, you would take your butt off your heels, hips up, and punch the bag. All right? Hips up, punch the bag. Elbows in, thumbs up. We were working on rolling our hips, elbows in, and punching. So we would do all kinds of simple drills all the time. Simple drills like that just to understand the theory of stalk blocking. Then we would go live, one-on-ones with the DBs on perimeter drill, and we'd have to incorporate. Biggest thing, never turn around and look for the ball carrier. Let the defender tell you where the ball carrier is. Take your spot to cut the defender off, depending on where you think the ball is going to be running, and then allow the defender to tell you where the ball is. All right, a lot of times the number one problem I see is guys turn around and find where the ball carrier is. That guy in front of you is going to tell you where the ball is. Watch that defender. If he comes screaming outside, you better move your feet to get out there, the ball's coming outside. If he comes ripping inside, which normally they won't as a DB, if he comes ripping inside, you better get your feet moving to try and seal him off on the inside. Proper leverage, stay in front, be a pain in the neck, harass, those are all the things you need to do to be a good stock blocker. Okay? A little bit easier in today's game. These guys are 6'3", 6'4". These receivers are manhandling guys on the perimeter. They're great blockers. But that's because they can physically get locked out on people at 6'3" or 6'4". They're usually taller than the DB. They can get guys locked out and steer them around because they're 400-pound bench pressers. A little bit different game now than it was 25 years ago. Okay? So again, though, you don't have to be Calvin Johnson, or you don't have to be 6'5", 225 pounds to block somebody. You just got to stay in somebody's way. You got to be persistent. You got to be annoying. Okay? Two things I can tell you, coaches always told me as a receiver. If you can block and you can catch, you'll find a place to play on any team. Okay? It doesn't matter about your 40 time. Doesn't matter if you're the most electric guy with the ball in space. If you can block and you can catch, you'll always find a place to play. All right? Those things stuck with me all the time, and they resonated with me all the time. While we're speaking about that, just to end, let me give you one simple drill you can do if you want to help your players catch the football. All right? A lot of guys like to let the football come to their body. A lot of young kids don't understand how to get their hands out to catch. The ball always comes into their body, bounces off shoulder pads, gives the DB an extra time to make a play. We want to get our hands out to catch the football. Simple drill to do that. Okay? Put your players on a goalpost. Put their chest on a goalpost. Okay? So the goalpost is right down the middle. Put their head to one side or the other. Get their hands out in front of them. As the coach, you stand 8 or 10 yards away. You don't have to be that far, and you don't have to have a great arm and rifle the ball out. All you're going to do is you're going to throw the ball right at the framework of their body. Okay? The ball cannot travel to get to their body, because if it does, it's going to hit the goalpost. So the receiver has to physically have his hands out, and he has to be able to catch the ball with his hands in front of him, because if the ball gets towards his body, if he tried to cradle that ball, the ball would hit the goalpost and go flying. Okay? So as far as drills are, you want to get good catching the ball, catch the ball. So as a receiver, you got to catch 1,000,000 balls if you want to be good at catching the ball. It's that simple. You want to get good at catching? Catch. Okay? But as far as techniques or fundamentals you might use, get your hands out, pinkies up, pinkies down, all the great stuff, eyes to the football. All right, another good drill. You know, I would always start, I had a guy ask me one time, what do you think you catch the football with? I said, I think I catch it with my hands. He said, okay, close your eyes and let me throw you this pass. I got the point right away.